Hello and welcome to the Oxygen Addict podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors, precisionfuelandhydration.com. You can personalize your fueling and hydration strategy so you perform at your best. With 15% off the first order of electrolytes and carbohydrate fuel with the code OA23, precisionfuelandhydration.com. So welcome to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Coach Rob Wilby, and I'm joined by Coach Chris Palfreman. Welcome aboard. How are you today?
Hello, Rob. Yeah, very well, thank you.
Every week, we bring you an episode of this podcast to help motivate and inspire you for triathlon-related activities. So listen, before we crack on, there's a couple of things you can do for us. Click like and subscribe on YouTube or the podcast player of your choice. That really helps the show get shown to more people. And if you're looking for help and advice with your training, you like what you hear today on today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. At Team Oxygen Addicts, I think we've got best all-round age group triathlon coaching program that there is out there. So if you'd like to find out more, click the link in the show notes. You can book a call with us directly to our calendars and we can have a chat face to face, see how we can best help you out with your triathlon training going into the next season. So, on today's episode, we're going to talk about triathlon myth busting. We've come across a load of stuff, haven't we, Chris, in this last week or two with people bringing up questions they're really common things we hear athletes say, but very often they're either not true or there are other ways to think about things. So, my aim with this is to help people come to terms with some of the challenges that they might get by watching social media or listening to other people talking around. Generally, when people tell you what you have to do, they're trying to sell you something. So what we're going to try and do today is we're going to try and provide an alternate point of view and provide a bit of balanced evidence for some of the overall myths around triathlon coaching. So the first thing we're going to kick this off with today is a question that we hear around swimming. And the phrase tends to be, just doing more swimming will make you faster. And I used to hear this a lot from new athletes who were coming down to the triathlon club back when I was head coach at Knutsford. I want to get better at swimming, so I'm just going to commit to swimming 3 times a week and I'm going to come down and do the miles and that's going to make me better. And again, while that's true to a certain extent, the devil here is in the details, isn't it? The nuance of the actual training, what you do, I think is much more important than the commitment to do more of it. And then an extreme, I think we tend to look at someone who comes in as a relatively novice swimmer. Their swim stroke isn't very well developed yet. Just doing more swimming at that point is just going to embed the stroke flaws that somebody has already. And that's a real challenge, isn't it?
I totally fell into that trap in my early days. And I remember turning
Yeah,
up to
me
the
too.
pool and doing 10 lengths, next session 12 lengths, session after that 16 lengths. And that was how simple I was approaching it. And as you say, that it's that balance. Yes, we want you to be in the pool on a regular basis and have as many productive swim sessions as possible, but that doesn't mean just turning up and swimming a kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers. It's the nuance, it's the balance. Each session should have a particular objective and working towards something longer term or medium term. And if we're just turning up to the pool, that is a sure way to burn out really quickly and actually start reinforcing negative, so poor technique. And we know that swimming, much like golf or tennis, is a fine motor skill sport, which is all based around technique. So it's all about highlighting your particular techniques to make sure that you're more efficient through the water. And yes, you need to be in the water quite a lot to do that, but that doesn't mean turning up every single day and just thrashing yourself and just trying to swim hard every day is the easiest way to basically derail your longer season.
Yeah, it's the waste of training time, isn't it, that we're trying to help people avoid. So the key thing that we're going to advise people to do here is it's the specific drills that you'll do. Often in a club session, you'll get these in people. I know I initially saw these as kind of an annoyance before we got to the real hard work of doing the swim training. And it was a while before I realized that the swim drills are the thing that's going to improve my technique, that's going to unlock the speed that my natural fitness has there already. And that's really how I want people to view this. The specific drill that you need to do next to correct the stroke flaw that you have that is stopping you progressing to the next level in your swimming. And so the way we coach people, we've got a set of 6 or 8 drills. These have been kind of distilled down through I love the Swim Smooth methodology. I love the way Paul and Adam at Swim Smooth really distilled swim training down into, if you have this flaw, then this drill will correct it. If you have that flaw, then this drill will correct it. And I'll give you an example from my personal background. Like I was a real, every time I breathed, my legs went apart like this. I could see myself in video doing it, but I didn't know what to do to fix it. So, like a lot of people whose legs splay apart when they breathe, I thought doing more kick drills was going to be the thing that fixed my weird legs when I was breathing. It was actually in a swim smooth session with Paul where he said, "Oh, the reason your legs are doing this is because your arm is doing that as you go to breathe. My arm's crossing over the center line. And so your legs spread apart to balance. If you do this drill, that will correct it." And immediately my legs stopped doing that. And because of that, I was 5 seconds, 100 faster immediately. And for me, that was that real light bulb moment of this doesn't work like running. It doesn't work like cycling even. More hard work, just for hard work's sake, isn't necessarily the thing that's going to move you forwards. So, yes, absolutely get the right drill done for the thing that's going to improve your swimming. That's what's going to really help.
I'd quite like just to feed in a final point on this, which is an element of social pressure, especially when we're looking at 70.3 and long distance athletes. When our identity revolves around long distance sport, the first questions we get from friends or family is, "Oh, how far did you swim this morning? How many lengths? How far? How fast?" And it's quite hard for us to put our egos aside. And not many of us would say we swam a kilometer today or 1.5K, and we didn't swim it fast, and we did half an hour of drills. And to be honest, that's just not impressive to the person that's outside the sport. But if you say that to someone on the inside of the sport, they'd be like, "Wow, you dedicated half an hour to drills today. That's seriously impressive," because we know how tedious and mentally tiring they are, and they're also frustrating because it doesn't feel like you're working towards your optimal goal of crossing an Ironman finish line, but you are.
Yeah.
But it's really split out in terms of how it feels versus the rewards you're going to get. So don't fall into the trap of you want to say, I swam 5 or 6K this morning. Your time will come for that. November in the UK is certainly not the time to be doing that for the majority of age groupers. And you'll see the odd professional banging out 10K in the pool, doing sets of hundreds. That's leave them to do that. That's okay.
Mhm.
Just because they do it doesn't mean you have to do it. So focus on your limiters and don't fall into the social pressure of it.
I saw a great video on Lucy Charles Barkley the other day, showing the drills that she does as part of her swimming. And I thought, that's awesome. Because again, when I was coming up, the message that was reinforced to me by the athletes I admired and the blogs they were writing was more swimming, more swimming. You need to be swimming, I remember 100,000 meters a month. You need to be swimming in order to get better. If Lucy Charles Barkley's still doing swim drills as part of her swim training, then the rest of us have got no excuse.
Absolutely.
All right. So the second myth we're going to bust today then is this one. You have to run fast and hard in order to become a faster runner. That is a classic and it is so pervasive through the triathlon industry. And it comes, I think, mainly from people who have come from a running background. Like I'm exactly the example of this personally. Came into triathlon from a running background. And what I knew was 2 hard interval sessions a week in a tempo run. And that was the backbone of my run training. And so I tried to incorporate that when I came into triathlon. And I think it's something that a lot of coaches who come into triathlon from a running background try to incorporate into their, initially at least, because it feels like it's the thing that people have to do in order to get better, right?
I'm just trying to work out why. So what you think this has probably come from the running background from, let's say, a lot of athletes in the winter being on the track maybe, and that
I think
being,
most running clubs are like that year round. I think
yeah,
they'll have 2 interval sessions a week, and in the summer they'll be on the track, and in the winter there'll probably be hill reps on the road around the park that the track's in or something, and a tempo run. And so it's like that 3 higher doses of intensity during the week. And as runners, that's the only way you can get that intensity because runners tend to, or certainly back in the day, I think things are changing now, but they tended to not cross train, tended to just run. As triathletes, what we really encourage people to do is look at the bigger picture and have that whole train as a triathlete, not train as a runner and a biker and a swimmer. I think I've used this analogy or example before when I did the coach education stuff for British Triathlon. One of the first things we do is get the coach candidates to map out a training schedule for people. They put them in little groups and there'd be the swimmers and the bikers and the runners, and they'd all decide what the important sessions a week were for the athletes to do. And you'd end up with 2 interval sessions on the bike from the bike coaches, 2 interval sessions on the run from the run coaches, and 2 threshold swim sets from the swim coaches. And it was only when you asked them to look back and look at it as a week and they'd go, oh, hang on a minute. Like, no one's going to live through this for more than 2 weeks. So it's all about, I think, as a triathlete, the benefit of it is we can spread out the intensity to places where there's less danger of illness and injury. And we're still going to get, the same frequency of hard workouts in a week. They're just not necessarily going to be run workouts, or certainly not run workouts all the time. And that's how we can get triathletes to be better runners because of I've heard of it called the halo effect, that your run fitness affects your bike fitness and vice
Mm.
versa. And the swim fitness affects your run fitness. That overall training load affects your ability to go fast and hard in all of the sports, I think. And that's the key thing for people to remember. And it's hard for people, isn't it? If you say to them, look, we're going to take all the hard running out of your program because you're a 55-year-old, slightly overweight male. And that's where the big risk is. If they come from a running background, it's like you're taking away. But that's the thing
Mm.
that's the thing I enjoy the most.
And actually, some listeners might be thinking, oh, well, that's okay for that particular example, but I'm, let's say, a hypothetical 30-year-old trying to podium or
Yeah.
be towards the front of the race. I still think that theory stands strong. We
Yeah.
want the vast, vast majority of your running to be easy running. And I saw that with my own eyes when I was training with a professional long distance athlete at the time, an Ironman. And it blew my mind that his easy runs were so easy that I thought I was doing something wrong. I was running far quicker than him. And he'd always say, these sessions don't really count. This is the bread and butter. We'll do some intensity on another day and watch the intensity that we do. That will be very specific towards my race goals and my race aims. And I just found it confusing at the time. And also, a very small anecdote was, I've got to be careful because I don't want to name drop here in a negative way, but when I was training in Oxford, I went to one of the track sessions thinking this is going to be my breakthrough run year as a long distance athlete. And the coach on the first evening said to me, hey, Chris, you've obviously got a little bit of talent, but if you want to run fast, guess what? You have to run fast. And I remember that being the first moment of me. It felt like a crossroads for me of either I'm going to sign up to this theory and just start running hard on a Tuesday evening, Thursday evening, and then do some tempo stuff on a Sunday with them. Or I go back to what we call e-pace or endurance running and protecting what I can do on the bike and also swim. And I naturally went that way. And I'm so glad I did because I was close to some other athletes did go for the Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday with him. And unfortunately, I think they're out of the sport now, or at least they're certainly not performing at the top and just full of injuries. They had
Yeah.
maybe 2 good months, and then there's just a breakdown around all sorts of limbs that you can imagine from hard running. And it's really tempting, isn't it? Because we all think that maybe maybe I can actually do these
Maybe
really
I'm the
hard interval
exception.
sessions. Yeah. But we
Yeah.
also know that it doesn't translate that well into long distance anyway. So even if you could, and that you've proven, got kind of a track record of being able to cope with that kind of intensity and impact, it's still not worth it because
Mm.
the reality is in that last 10K of 70.3 or a full Ironman, you're not going to be drawing upon those fast twitch muscles that you would be in a 200 or 400 around a track. So I think step away and look at yourself as a triathlete, not as a runner.
And I think there's very little correlation between an athlete's 5K run split and
Mm.
certainly their Ironman marathon split. I think people who focus on that are focusing on the wrong thing and think, well, I'll try and get my run split faster during the winter, so therefore my marathon run split will be faster because I'm a better runner. Don't think there's any correlation. One of the greatest Ironman marathon performances I've seen at age group was a mate of mine called Simon that he was very, very overweight when he started training, and he was never a fast runner. I don't think he ever broke 20 minutes for 5K, but he could turn out a 3:25 marathon at the end of an Ironman, like Ironman Wales. He went and did that at. Whereas I was a 16-minute something 5K runner, and I couldn't get anywhere near him for all but one of the Ironman marathons that I did. And it baffled me for years. And it's that theory of it's just a different kind of fitness. It's the durability to be able to keep going for multiple hours. And that just isn't trained by the run training being really, really hard. So, okay. Myth number 3. We've touched on this already a little bit, Chris. Slow training is just junk miles. Man, I hate that phrase. I hate the junk miles phrase. There's very specific reasons to do slower training, aerobic training, we'll call it. There's very, very specific reasons to do it. If you don't know why you're doing it, I think there's this temptation to think, well, this could just be going out and riding my bike, or it could just be going out and running. But my argument would be this is how we adapt fat max. So, for people who don't know what that is, we all have an ability to burn fat and to get energy from fat at a certain rate. And fat max presents the maximum amount of energy per minute we get from burning fat. And over time, if we train at the right intensity, we can gradually raise that level of, or raise the amount of energy you can get from fat. Now, part of this is a genetic factor to it. And I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts that if you put a Joe Skipper or a Christian Blumenfeld in the lab, they would naturally be born with an extremely high fat max, which isn't to negate at all the fact that they've done an incredible amount of training to increase and improve that. But there's a genetic component to it. For almost everybody, the slower training that we do, if we do it in the right way at the right time, it should never be thought of as junk miles because it's training our body to metabolize fat. And by training it to metabolize fat, you're going to get more efficient at that. And we get more energy per minute from fat when we're out there. Okay. So we're not going to train that at all if we're doing FTP training sessions. We're not going to train it at all in any kind of tempo running sessions or any kind of threshold swim sessions. We're only going to train that ability to raise fat max if we hang out just at or just below the fat max area. If we go above the fat max area, the intensity gets a bit higher. What happens is your body just quite abruptly shuts off the fat metabolism completely. And so that's why we often see, like if we've got shorter distance athletes coming into Ironman, we often see them really struggle on the marathon. And it's not because they're not really fit, it's because that fat max thing hasn't adapted yet. And so when they get onto the marathon, there's simply no carbs left in the body. They can't absorb enough to train, to fuel a marathon, and they end up walking. It's a real challenge.
I think it'd be quite interesting, really briefly, to define what junk miles are, because I think we, even you and I, Rob, might have a slightly different understanding of junk miles. So this is just my opinion. Junk miles, if I hear that in conversation, I'm thinking athletes that are just going round on their bikes, for example, at very low intensity for long periods of time, repeatedly, whether it's daily or every other day, for long stretches of time. So call it 4 to 6 months. Many athletes on the outside may see that as junk miles. As you've kind of insinuated there, I don't think that's junk miles. I think that
I
is
agree.
working on a very
Yeah.
specific part of your aerobic system, which is what we need for the long distance stuff. However, I do still think the definition of junk miles stands strong. But for me, it's that what you call middle ground. So they're not riding easy, but they're not riding hard. And then they're in that middle kind of yellowy, below tempo, high aerobic. It's that mixture of
Yeah.
the athlete would say, "Oh no, I'm just riding easy because I can still have a conversation." But the reality is you're way above your fat max, and you're probably flirting with your absolute top end aerobic endurance. Therefore, the return you're getting on that session is really low. And doing one session like that in a blue moon, there aren't going to be, the risk isn't high in terms of illness, injury, all that. But the risk is that you're never going to be getting the benefit that you want from your endurance training. And we are endurance athletes, and this is your perfect opportunity to be working on improving your aerobic system.
Yeah.
So that's where I think junk miles still do exist. And I see them. I'm quite lucky because I look out my window here in the office and I see cyclists go past. And I know quite a lot of them, and I know instantly whether they're doing junk miles. And the majority of them are because they're going past my window way too quick. And I'll see them in the evening and they say, "Oh no, I just went out for an easy 3 hours endurance." Well, I'm going to call that junk miles because that was definitely in that yellowy, orangey zone that we want to avoid. Stay in what we'd call the green, blue or green, so zone 1, zone 2, low zone 2 if you can. And the longer periods of time you can spend in that, the better. And don't think, "Oh, I'm getting a little bit fitter, I'll push a little bit more," because then you're negating the benefits that you could be having.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that myth, isn't it, of like, I'll give 101%. So if 100% of fat max is good, then 110% must be even better.
Yeah.
You're dead right. I think we can define junk miles as anything that doesn't have a specific purpose or anything where you had a purpose and someone else has interacted with your training. You go out on a ride with a mate who's riding just a bit harder than you want to, which, let's be honest, pretty much always happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Absolutely.
It's a good definition. I like it, mate.
Mm.
Okay, myth number 4. You have to do high volume base miles over winter. Now, I'll give you the classic anecdote here from my dad. My dad was a cyclist through the 60s, and he regales me with stories of going out after work on a Wednesday night on his bike, riding from Wigan up into the moors with the lights on, and the lights fail and they need a dynamo on the back light. And as I get into endurance training, he was saying to me, you just need to go out, and you need to go out more, and you need to ride as much as you can. The winter time is all about doing long, slow miles as much as you can. And you don't want to be doing any high intensity work at all during the winter because it's the wrong time of year to be doing it. And this allows us to address, it sounds a bit like we're contradicting what we just said, but we're not. And the reason for that is, again, the training like a triathlete theory allows us to polarize our training, and it allows us to do specific training at specific sessions at specific times of the week. So there's a time and a place for your long aerobic ride and your long aerobic run, but there's also the time for you to make the best use of the time that you've got. And so for most working age groupers, they're probably going to have about an hour of training time during the week. And if it's winter time, by the time they get home from work, it's going to be dark. So how do we make the best use of a 1 hour session? Well, it's not going to be to try and raise fat max by riding in the green, blue, easy zone. It's going to be, let's make the best use of the time we have here to try and raise your FTP over the winter, make you a stronger and more powerful rider. So as the nights get lighter and as the summer comes in later in the year, and as we get closer to our long distance races, we can do the specific endurance training then with a bigger engine. And I think that's the key to sort of unpicking the myth of what we do during winter as triathletes, isn't it?
Yeah, I do think where you live plays a bit of a role in terms of your decision making around the training plan that you go for. Because I do think if you're in Australia or somewhere in America where actually your perceived winter is mid 20s in terms of degrees and you have light evenings, then there could be an argument of maybe not always going to that style of session, to, the FTP 1 hour workout. But we know that in the UK, as you just said, it's incredibly tough to be training in the winter. And I don't know anyone bar full-time athletes at the moment that aren't doing that in the UK. So
Mhm.
no one's doing, I call it the base or traditional base, where you'd go out and to get the actual benefits from that, we're talking about an enormous amount of hours. It's not just replacing your 1 hour FTP session for a 1 hour easy ride. It's a lot more. So
Yeah.
you're looking at 20 hours odd on the bike, plus your swing, plus your running. So that leave that to the guys and girls that have the ability to do that full time in the conditions, a lot of them on training camps, all that kind of stuff. And you'll
Yeah.
see with, Team Ineos and stuff, you'll see on social media. That's why they're going to your Mallorcas or mainland Spain to do that kind of training. And that's their job. They have the ability to do that. Majority of us working, 9 to 5 or similar, we just can't do it. And you're going to burn out. You're not going to get the benefits that you're looking for. So I totally sign up to slightly shorter sessions, more intensity, work on the higher end of your aerobic and anaerobic system. And then as you get closer to your, call it A race, then you can turn those sessions into being specific to the demands of that session as opposed to just doing FTP work
Yeah.
or anything similar. So yeah, it's all about what's realistic for you. And you've got to be honest with yourself.
It's all about making the best use of the time that you have, isn't it? And you're right, there are going to be some people who have more time available to them. The argument I would use here for still doing an FTP block this distance out from your Ironman, especially this is specific really to Ironman and 70.3 athletes. At some point, we're going to have to do a block of training to make your engine bigger. We can't do it in the 12 to 16 weeks before the race because that's when our specific endurance and moderate tempo endurance for the 70.3 athletes, that's when that needs doing. So we have to do it further away. So it even makes sense for if you've got access to that kind of weather. I nicked this idea wholesale from a guy who was a pro triathlete, pro Ironman back in the day. And he moved away from the American winter and went to live in Spain for the winter so he could do more training. The next season, he was worse Ironman because he'd just ridden round and done loads of aerobic miles all the time. He came back and was like, I'm not as fit as I was at the end of a Boston winter. What's different? Oh, I haven't done an FTP block this year. Honestly, for me, that was like the light bulb
Mm.
moment of, well, of course, we've got to train specifically at the right time for the event. So, yeah, I think for most of the age group athletes, it's just about reassuring people you can make really good use of an hour a night. You can make really good use of it. You don't have to feel as though you're missing out. You don't have to feel as though you have to be doing 20, 30, 40 hours of training. It's perfectly possible to get yourself really fit and get to the top of your age group and be competitive on relatively limited training time.
And be patient because your high miles and your high volume will come. It just doesn't have
Yeah,
to be in the winter.
yeah,
You will be doing big, 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 big sessions, especially if you're looking at Ironman. That will come. So just be a little bit patient on that.
yeah, 100%. Right, I've got a slightly controversial one here. I got this from watching a video the other day on YouTube. I want to mention David Goggins. So Goggins is currently coaching. You got to go and find this video and check it out. He's coaching an MMA fighter, and there's a video of him coaching this guy doing a mile's worth of single leg split lunges across a field. The guy is, you know, absolute animal, and his catchphrase is "just be hard, just get the work done." And you watch this video, this MMA fighter, his knees are giving out, he's fallen over sideways, he's been sick on the treadmill. And, one of Goggins' things is just be hard, get the training done no matter what. And I watched it and I thought, this is awesome. It's totally inspiring and it gives you that sort of Rocky Balboa feeling that you want to get on the training again. And then I took a step back and I was like, man, that dude's not walking for another 10 days, let alone doing any meaningful MMA training. And I'm sure there's a reason behind him training with Goggins, right? But if we try and translate that into the average age grouper's mindset, probably we're going to do more damage than good.
Mm.
So I thought the flip of this just be hard thing is just be sensible. And we talk about HRV guided training a lot, heart rate variability. It's almost the opposite of that Goggins. I'm going to do the session no matter what. And we try and make it really smart. And we say, we'll get the session done when the body's ready to absorb the session. And that's the message that I think I would like to push forward to athletes. Now, no one's going to be buying a book from me. No one's going to be signing up for get Coach Rob to come and live in his apartment and beast him for a week. 'Cause
I
that's
love that.
just not my approach, right? But I think we're going to have a lot more long-term consistency with this method than possibly David might do with his method. That's my conjecture.
Of course, and you've always got to take these kinds of videos with a pinch of salt, and it's the double-edged sword of social media. It worked for you. It brought you in. You're part of the story. You love it. You probably got a shot of adrenaline. You're thinking, this is what it's all about. But you've got to take that with a pinch of salt, and you shouldn't really apply that to your everyday. And you've got to ask yourself why they're doing that. And I'm not going to put words in anyone's mouth, but it may not be for the best of that athlete. It could be for views, for likes, for it's the part of their job to be on social media and get as many views as possible. So
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
really good point.
enjoy it for what it is. Don't necessarily try and apply it to your daily routine.
Okay, myth number 6, have no zeros in your training diary. Man, this was such a big one when I was coming up, the no zeros philosophy. The thought
What's
that if
that?
you want
No training days.
no
Is that
days with 0 in your training
right?
diary, like never have a day where you do nothing. There was this theory for a while of, well, if you train on Sunday morning and then Monday evening, you've had
Mm,
24 hours of rest. So that's like a recovery day. So
mm,
crack on kind of thing.
mm,
And again, it's an extension of that social media idea, isn't it? Of you buy into this idea that like there's this hardcore thing that I'm part of. I think it's such a terrible idea in retrospect. For all but the very, very highest level best pro triathletes. And like for me, I wanted to flip that round and say, plan the zeros. They're really
mm.
important. Plan the recovery day in there. It's such an important thing for the working age grouper to have a recovery focused day and a recovery focused week at the appropriate time.
I actually remember this was one of our first conversations, whenever it was in France over a year
Yeah.
ago, and we were talking about training philosophies and how we approach training plans and all that kind of stuff. And I remember a real light bulb moment of, oh, wow, I'm definitely on the same page as Rob on this. This is brilliant. And it was when you were talking to me about your process of how you create certain plans and you start by planning them around the rest days. So let's say Monday is rest day for the majority of my athletes. So that's the first thing that's going in training peak. And after that, I can build intensity and duration, knowing that the Monday that's coming is also another rest day, as opposed to a lot of training plans being based around that hard session, that hard session, that long session, and then I'll try and squeeze in a rest day there, maybe, and a rest day there, maybe. And the majority of the time, it doesn't stand on its leg that long. It falls apart because the fatigue levels are too high the deeper you get into the season. So I remember, Rob, it really struck a chord with me that it was kind of exactly the same philosophy that I was going for myself, which was you have to force that rest day in, even though no athlete wants it. And we don't really want to see it as a coach. We don't find it that inspiring to see as a 0 day. But we know that mentally and physically, you're going to be in a far better shape to absorb the training that's already happened and the training that's coming, as long as that rest day has been respected. So
Yeah.
I think that's if you, yeah, for any athlete that's shopping around different versions of training plans, that would be the first thing that I would look for now is what's the sequence of rest days and how much importance is led towards the rest day. And if it's not that important, and if it's have a rest day whenever you feel like it, or have a rest day when you have a holiday, to me, that's a massive red flag. You got to be really careful, especially as the bigger volume stuff comes. We know that the immune system gets pretty battered in the kind of form of training that we're doing. So respect your body. Remember, you've got to be a healthy athlete to be a fast one, a successful one. So it makes total sense to fully respect that rest day.
Yeah. I think the guiding principle here is if you can't recover from the training that you've done, or if you don't recover from the training you've done, you may as well not have done some of it because you're just going to put yourself deeper and deeper into a hole. And a lot of this is from personal experience as an athlete who was terrible at self coaching, terrible at regulating the recovery of stuff because I was driven by obsession and compulsion to train because I loved training, but I hated planning the recovery in. And often, even on a recovery day, I would decide randomly at 3 o'clock to go for a run, because I'd started to feel better and recover.
Yeah.
And so that's really what put me into a massive, massive fatigue hole. And I'm really keen for athletes to avoid that. Yeah. Okay. Myth number 7, to burn fat, you have to train fasted. Oh, this is a can of worms, isn't it? I can see on your face. It's like, I don't even want to go there.
Yeah. I'm going to let you lead on this one.
All right. So look, there's a lot of stuff out there at the moment about fasted training, about fat adapted training, about
Can we
whether
start, Rob? Sorry, Rob. Can we just start by defining what fasted training is? I think a lot of athletes may be confused about what actually the term fasted means. So can you give us
yeah,
an
so
overview on
so
that?
typically what that means is it's people getting up very first thing in the morning and doing their exercise sessions before they've had anything to eat at all or anything to drink, any kind of calories at all whatsoever. And the theory of this is if you give your body any carbohydrate first thing, it's going to default to using that carbohydrate rather than using the stored fat stores, essentially. So it works off the theory erroneously that if there are carbs available, your body's going to use them rather than using any of the stored body fat. So, first up, there's massive disagreement in the scientific community about whether that's true or not. You can read as many papers saying that that's true as it's false. And so, the way to look at this, I think, is let's be moderate and be sensible with it. We know that the key determinant of whether or not you're burning fat when you're training is actually exercise intensity, not whether you're fasted or not. So, we can kind of sidestep the whole issue of whether we should train fasted or not. I don't think we should. That's where I stand on this. I think you should have a moderate breakfast and then you should go and do your session. Even for those fat burning long runs and long rides, have a moderate breakfast. And by that, we're just trying to avoid something really, really, really sugary, but anything really that's got some fats and some carbohydrates in. So toast with peanut butter or, porridge with almonds or something like that. Something where the carbs are offset with something not buttery and fatty as well. Avocado on toast is another great one. Then go out and do your session. But remember, it's the intensity and not going above fat max that's going to be the thing that really determines how much fat burning goes on and how your body learns to burn the fat as we're in that session. Much, much more so than whether you eat before you do it or even whether you eat while you're going along. So it's the
Mm.
intensity is the key thing to control. So until you can control that, to go back of your example from earlier, the athlete who goes just a bit too hard all the time, till you control that, you can forget about the idea of fasted training or not, because that's the limiting factor. If you go out fasted with nothing to eat and you train too hard, your body just turns off the fat supply and you shift to the stored carbs that are in your body. So, it's almost irrelevant.
I agree with you there, Rob. I think what I will add is for the athlete thinking I'm going to try something along the lines of fasted training to try and lose weight. To me, that's a big red flag. Fasted training shouldn't necessarily be linked to
Mm,
weight loss. And I'd always say to
agree.
athletes that I'm working with, if you're looking to lose weight, which for some athletes can be a positive thing, um, please try and do that outside of training. So it's to do with your food choices and timing of food choices off the bike or off your feet in terms of running or swimming. And I feel that athletes that are trying fasted training often fall at that hurdle. They'll do their 2 hour, let's say, fasted easy ride, for example. But then what happens in the 4 hours once they're through the door at home is they're scoffing their face with anything and everything they can see.
We've all
And
done
so
it, haven't we?
yeah, they've undone that potentially good work. And as age groupers, that's why I'd really steer away from fasted. And there's so many other areas of gains that you could be getting through your training. And if weight loss is part of your agenda with endurance sports, then make sure that you split out training and you split out weight loss as two different objectives. They do complement each other, but that doesn't mean each each training session should have the objective of weight loss, because that's where you're going to start yo-yoing and all sorts of health risks with that.
Yeah, totally
So yeah,
agree.
I
Like
think
you
that's
said
where I
there.
stand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really, really glad. And I think for the people who are looking to lose weight, the low hanging fruit to reduce is anything that you have to eat after your dinner. So try and have your dinner at 5 or 6 o'clock. So you're heading into the evening and your stomach's emptying. So cut out or reduce anything you have after your dinner. Cut out and reduce alcohol. Not because alcohol is necessarily a thing that makes you fat, but it definitely is something that reduces your ability to make good food choices,
Mm.
and it reduces your ability to remember why you're doing this in the first place. So that's the low hanging fruit, and address those first. Yeah. Okay. Myth 8. If you want a faster bike split, you just need more power. It's a classic, isn't it? If I could just raise my FTP to 300, then I could definitely, definitely get my bike split under 230 for a half Ironman. It's a classic way of thinking. So we're
Mhm.
going to address this with people and we're going to say, look, getting more power on the bike is great, but not at the expense of ruining your position and being able to be aerodynamic. The aerodynamics, and to a certain extent, the aerodynamic kit choices that you have play as much of a part in how fast you're going to go on the bike as the actual bike power that you've got, I think. And that's something for people of any walk of life, of any shape, size, fitness. You can get faster on the bike with equipment choices and by having a better bike position on the bike. And I'm always brought back to the bike power numbers. Brad Wiggins said it took him 460 watts to set his 25-mile competition record. I know the exact number, I'm not going to say it, but when Botti broke Wigo's record, he was in the region of, let's say, between 50 and 100 watts less than Wigo when he broke the competition record. And that's down to having his kit choices and his aerodynamic position optimized absolutely perfectly. And Bradley Wiggins is a guy who had a decent position already, but it just shows what's possible when someone goes hunting after those extra marginal gains that you can get from position and from equipment.
Mm. I've had this conversation with a few athletes recently who are asking the kind of difficult questions around why am I doing so much FTP work now in
Mm.
November? I've got my Ironman in the UK summer. And to me, the way that I approach it mentally is I want an athlete to work really hard at FTP now, knowing that when they're doing their 5, 6, or 7 hour ride, they're able to do that far more efficiently and able to hold their position for longer because they're a stronger rider. So it's not as if we're saying you don't need to increase your power that much. Don't worry about it. We still want you to work really hard and work on that FTP number to over the months increase. But that's so that when you do ride at, call it your Ironman power, that's going to feel so much easier, not just for you mentally, but physically, your major muscle groups are going to be able to hold that amount of power for a longer period of time, hence you being more efficient for longer, therefore having a faster bike. So power is important, but more important than power is your ability to put that out on the road with of low rolling resistance and aerodynamics and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So power is just one element of many things that go into a really good bike sport.
I'm going to interject here as well, and it's slightly off topic, but it is absolutely essential for any athlete listening to recognize that your outdoor FTP number might be different to your indoor FTP number. And when you shift from indoor training to outdoor training, you have to have a baseline for outdoor FTP test because it might be 50 watts different. And if you're trying to hit percentages of your indoor number when your outdoor number is much lower, you're going to end up trying to shoot for power numbers that are going to blow you into pieces. So we have these outdoor FTP tests planned into athletes' plan, but sometimes they don't get done. And what we found this season with specific athletes in specific circumstances is a race has been derailed solely based on the fact that they've chosen to not do an outdoor FTP test at the appropriate point. And they've been working off percentages of their indoor number and have been totally baffled as to why the race has gone south on race day. And it all comes down to a choice made 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks earlier to not do the outdoor FTP test. So that's just a little, it's just so important to anyone going out there to know what your outdoor numbers are. Okay, finally then, point number 9, myth number 9. For a faster run split in triathlon, you have to become a faster runner. Well, that sounds like it stands to reason, doesn't it? And it almost sounds like nonsense to suggest it's not the case. So how can we address this, right? So how could you possibly have a faster run split in a triathlon without becoming a faster runner? So I think the way we're going to say to people to think about this is your run split is much more indicative of your bike pacing relative to your bike fitness than it is of your run fitness. That's a hard thing for people to get their heads around. And there's multiple examples of people who have improved their run fitness, but then have gone slower on race day in their run because they've gone proportionally even harder on the bike, and that's negatively affected their run. So it's this massive balancing and juggling act, isn't it, between recognizing that run fitness is one thing, but ability to deliver run fitness off the bike is the important thing.
I'd urge athletes to try and move away from that mindset and even that form of question of, I want to be a faster runner. I think as a sport, we're starting to talk more about triathlon being the sport itself of swim, bike, and run within that. And we're not
Yeah.
splitting out the disciplines as much. And I think this holds true in this particular example. And I'd love the athlete to be asking, I want to be a faster triathlete. And within that, I can see that my run split isn't quite balanced with my ability in bike and swim. Therefore, what do I do? Well, actually, yes, there might be some stuff you can specifically do in the running that you're doing, but have a look at what you're doing in swimming, what you're doing in cycling, and also what you're doing in strength and conditioning. And look outside of those boxes as well. Look what you're doing with your sleeping, with your recovery, with your hydration, nutrition, all that stuff. That's how you become a faster triathlete overall. You don't become a faster triathlete by thinking, oh, I'm going to start running really fast or going to start doing some PBs in 5K, 10Ks. It's just not how it works. That's the old school, I want to be a quicker swimmer, cyclist, or runner. Get rid of that, put it all together. You're triathletes. How do I become the faster triathlete? And then you can nitpick of how you get from A to B quicker.
Yeah. You're dead right. It's to ask the question, how do I have a faster run split? Not to start from, I need to become a faster runner so that I have a faster run split in the race. Yeah, 100%, mate. All right, so listen, that's taken us to the end of the 9 myths today. I hope that's helped a lot of people out there get to grips with some of the things they might have heard and to reassure people a little bit that there are smart ways around using your training time that can help you maximize the training time that you do have without necessarily needing to turn yourself inside out in every single session. So to wrap this up, here are some discount codes and deals for you. At precisionfuelandhydration.com, you can use the code OA23 for 15% off your first electrolyte order. And remember, you can go to their website and use the free fuel and hydration planning tool to receive a personalized strategy for your next race. The planner will help you understand your own carbohydrate, electrolyte, and fluid needs so you can refine your strategy during training. And you can also even book a free one-to-one video consultation with PFNH's athlete support team. And they'll help you nail your race nutrition plan and help you perform at your best on race day. And also over at teamoxygenaddict.com, I think we've got the most comprehensive endurance sports coaching program for busy age groupers. You can book a call with us and see if you'd be a good fit for joining the team. And let's see how we can best help you out achieve your endurance event goals for the coming season. I've had a number of calls over the last week, Chris, with people who've been podcast listeners for, in some cases, years, and who've said, do you know what? I've been thinking about giving you a call and talking about training for ages. And when I say, well, why is it taking you till now to do it? They've said, do you know what? I don't really know. I just haven't really got round to it. I hear you say it on the podcast every week, and then I don't actually get round to ever doing it. So if that's you, if you're listening now or watching now and you're thinking you want to make a step into coaching for next season, then please click the link in the show notes, book a call with us, and we'd be happy to help you out. All right, then. So remember, there's links in the show notes, so you don't have to remember them. And until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby. He's Coach Chris Palfreman, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict podcast.